Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Harry Cosmo, freelance football journalist for BBC Sport, and welcome to sunny North Yorkshire. I'm currently in my parents' back garden filming this video because I'm visiting them for a few days ahead of Newcastle's trip to Sheffield United at Bramall Lane on Sunday. Eddie Howe has just done his pre-match news conference. The situation with Sandro Tonali is definitely the headline. Eddie Howe sort of explaining why perhaps he struggled in his early Newcastle days since that fantastic debut against Aston Villa, mainly because he's struggled with an injury. He had one full training session in that time in the last month at Newcastle, so obviously for a player who's adjusting to a new country, adjusting to a new league, adjusting to a new life, basically, as he sort of opened up in his pre-AC Milan press conference. You know, that's always going to be difficult for somebody to adjust to that and not have the ability to train fully with his new teammates and, you know, get up to speed with the English game. Of course he's going to struggle. So that does sort of explain quite a lot, I think, in terms of his situation. Eddie Howe was also updating on the injury front. There's no fresh concerns from the draw at AC Milan ahead of the trip to Bramall Lane. Only Joe Linton and Joe Willock are still out from that game. I think it's a better performance than people give it credit for. I think Newcastle deserve more credit for the way that they held AC Milan at arm's length in the second half and adjusted and learned to put out fires on the pitch. It's going to be a different challenge on Sunday when Newcastle are going to be overwhelming favourites against a team that hasn't won yet in the league. Obviously I've got quite a bit of experience of watching Sheffield United at Bramall Lane, and all I can really say is I think the way Newcastle started the game in Milan will serve them well at Bramall Lane, because there's a lot of sting to take out the atmosphere. The Sheffield United fans are boisterous. They get themselves going with their anthem, Greasy Chip Butty, which is quite entertaining to watch. And I think that, you know, they'll look to start fast, and if Newcastle can take the sting out of the game with playing, you know, good possession, which is I think something that Eddie Howe really wants to do with his team this season. He wants to sort of progress to being more possession based, knowing that the intensity and the pressing can't always work when, you know, the personnel isn't there. You're missing Joe Linton, you're missing Joe Willock. That's two things, but also the situation with the new rules of having the ball and playing longer matches. That's going to have an impact on Newcastle's ability to press and go in sharp bursts of intensity. So progression and evolution is the order of the day for Eddie Howe's team, and they need to learn how to dominate possession. And this is a game where they probably will or need to, certainly early on, to get a foothold in the game. Once they do that, though, I think they'll have a very good chance of getting a good result. I think you could expect some changes, given that Manchester City come to St James's Park in the Carabao Cup on, I think it's Wednesday next week. That's going to be a very tough game, obviously not ideal for Newcastle's hopes of progressing through, getting back to Wembley again and giving another go at the Carabao Cup, obviously after last season's heroics. Could we see Tino Livramento come in potentially at right back for Kieran Trippier, or full stop, or right back for Kieran Trippier if he goes to left back to replace Dan Burn, who did well in Milan, but obviously his shortcomings are becoming quite a noticeable issue, I think, for Newcastle this season. But I think partly the reason is because of Joe Willock's absence and the lack of width on the left, which Joe Willock was so good at providing last season with his pace and his, he almost hugged the touchline, which is quite interesting for a left-sided centre midfielder. But the way he sort of got round that left-hand side and created that outlet on the left when he played was something that sort of meant that there wasn't really a huge need for Dan Burn to get up the pitch. So, without that, and with Harvey Barnes not being known for sort of direct running on the outside, he likes to cut inside and link up with the midfield. Newcastle are potentially lacking that, and that shines a light on why Dan Burn doesn't quite work at left back. Newcastle should be confident of a victory, because obviously Sheffield United, for all their improvement in recent weeks, they're still winless. Pressure's growing on Paul Heckingbottom. I think they were slightly unlucky in the way that things worked out for them at Tottenham, and they did play quite well against Everton. But they've leaked goals, and they conceded 2 goals against an Everton team that struggled for goals all season, and really hasn't looked sort of like threatening in most games. So that there will be chances for Newcastle, more chances than you imagine that they got at San Siro, which was kind of the issue, that how isolated Alexander Isak looked. I think Callum Wilson might well get a start in this game, but again, I'm not sure on the team sheet. We'd be interested to see what Eddie Howe's got. Plenty of options. The only two that are missing are, as I say, Joe Linton and Joe Willock. I would be interested to see if Tonali starts now, because obviously the situation last week, Eddie Howe was asked about his performance and his mentality, going back to the San Siro, and I think, given that he's not trained, and given that he's sort of had this difficult month since the Villa game, you've got to cut him a bit of slack. It's always difficult to go back to a club that you love, and a club that and your home effectively, and given that he's had those troubles, it's not ideal. So I didn't think he was as bad as a lot of people said. I thought he handled himself well, as Eddie Howe mentioned in his press conference just then as well. So but I'd be interested to see if he'll start again. I think Bruno Guimaraes was much better, and has been much better in the last couple of games, and I think the onus will be on him to dictate the play on Sunday against, as I say, a Sheffield United side that haven't had the sort of intensity that they did on the last time they came to the Premier League under Chris Wilder. They've looked a lot more counter-attack based, which will be something to watch for Newcastle, obviously. But they've got to stamp their authority on the game. I think if they do that, then they shouldn't have too many issues to get the victory. Newcastle are in a much better place than they were after Brighton. I think they've sort of regained a little bit of their confidence, regained a little bit of their reputation, a little bit of their kudos as well. In some ways, they're not playing with their trademark intensity, but I think, as I say, that's partly deliberate, partly circumstantial, and partly to do with the personnel as well. Thank you very much for joining me. I think Newcastle have a really good chance of winning this one on Sunday. Please do continue to like, share and subscribe. Continue to support this channel in its infancy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.